Yo, what's going on YouTube, and welcome back to our weekly Goal Line Hockey Power Rankings. We are officially in week 1 of the NHL season for the 2023-24 NHL season. I do want to apologize right off the bat. We had some audio technical issues on Sunday for our weekly power rankings that would have been live. I was not able to put up a power rankings the other day, so we're redoing it again today in a pre-record, and hopefully you guys will be back next Sunday for our week 2 power rankings. Everything will be back scheduled Sunday morning next week. But for this week, it's a pre-record, so hopefully you guys like and subscribe to the channel in the meantime to help us out. And I will see you guys again next Sunday for week 2. Again, Sunday morning. I believe that's going to be the 23rd. I think it's the 23rd. Sunday the 23rd for our next power rankings. But with that out of the way, let's talk about this week's power rankings. And staying at number 32, sorry Shaka, is the San Jose Sharks. So the San Jose Sharks stay at number 32. Their offense is struggling mightily. You know, that lack of a real goal-scoring threat is a real problem for this team right now. The fact they have a couple of pretty big injuries too. Mikael Granlund is on IR. Logan Couture also on IR. And, that kind of leads to a situation where your top 6 is Philip Zadina, William Eklund, Anthony Duclair, Mike Hoffman, Thomas Bordeleau, and Tomas Hertl. Just not enough depth there for the Sharks. They're not going to score a ton of goals this year. We saw that pretty prevalent through the first couple games of the season for the Sharks. And it will likely continue. The Anaheim Ducks are number 31. Now, the Anaheim Ducks are not too far off, of course. They do have a win to their name, though, which is nice to see. But they are another team that's a little bit toward the middle of the pack. They're not terrible for goals for, not terrible goals against. They're right around the middle of the pack, 17th for goals for, and 12th in the National Hockey League for goals against. They end up winning a big game in Carolina. They won 6-3 against the Hurricanes. The Hurricanes are a very good hockey team, and I kind of look at it as fool's gold here for the Ducks. I want to say that they're better than they are, but I'm not confident yet that they are going to be a legit world beater this season. So that win definitely means something, but in a small sample size, it was hard for me to move them up any more than number 31, and kind of staying where they were last week. Number 30, this one hurt a little bit. Because the Seattle Kraken are number 30 on our list. They are 0-2-1 to start the season. Their most recent loss being a 2-1 loss to the St. Louis Blues. Definitely not the start that they wanted. Their goals for, they only have 2 goals so far in 3 games, which is just abysmal, less than a goal per game. And their goals against, they've given up 9 goals so far, which puts them in the bottom 10 of the National Hockey League. So they got to score more, and they got to give up less goals. And that's a recipe right now for disaster. When you're 30th in the NHL for goals for, 20th for goals against, you're not going to win a lot of hockey games. And that's where the Seattle Kraken are right now. Definitely not the start that they were hoping for. Number 29, the Philadelphia Flyers. So the Philadelphia Flyers might be catching people off guard a little bit. I think a lot of people going into this season kind of see Philly as an easy win, and the Ottawa Senators were the first team this year to find out the hard way. You might not want to think of the Flyers that way. The Flyers win a game 5-2 against the Ottawa Senators. A couple of interesting players on the Philadelphia Flyers this season. Bobby Brink has been in the lineup. Yegor Zamola has been in the lineup. So we're seeing a couple of different players in the lineup for the Philadelphia Flyers. Ryan Poehling, Nick Seeler, Owen Tippett, Mark Stoll. So this is a different looking Flyers team than we saw last year. This is definitely by no means a playoff team in my eyes yet, but this is a team that has an ability to maybe be better. Now, their penalty kill, not good. Only 66% on the penalty kill compared to the league average of 80%. That's got to get better for the Flyers. They have to be good on the penalty kill, because this is not a team that's going to be a super big goal-scoring threat. You got to be able to have a little bit more in terms of your defense. Sean Couturier has an undisclosed injury that was announced yesterday morning. Couturier was unable to practice Monday, raising doubts regarding his availability versus Vancouver, which would be Tuesday tonight. Jordan Hall of NBC Sports Philadelphia reports. So that is very concerning in game number 3 of the season that Sean Couturier's availability is already questionable. So that's another thing to keep an eye on for the Flyers. They need Coots in the lineup if they want any chance of success this season. Konechny leads the team in points with 4 so far. Number 28 on this list, guys, listen. Very early in the season, and I need to preface that, but the Chicago Blackhawks, man, the Chicago Blackhawks might be catching some people off guard. So, of course, their first game of the season is in Pittsburgh, and in typical Penguins fashion, they have a 1-goal lead late in the third, and they end up giving up 2 late, kind of bad goals by Tristan Jarry. But hey, Chicago goes in and wins Connor Bedard's NHL debut. A really nice start on the East Coast for Connor Bedard and the Blackhawks. And they followed that up and actually played well beyond that. So you would think, all right, that's their first game and things will start to come back to reality. Not the case necessarily. They would go on to play the Boston Bruins, who are a very good team, and they were kind of expected to lose that game. So nobody was all that surprised by that result. But what gives you some confidence is, yes, they ended up losing a close game to Montreal. They kept that close, and then they beat the Toronto Maple Leafs in Toronto 4-1, handing the Leafs their first loss of the season. So what's interesting about this team right now is they're scoring a couple goals. They already have, 11 goals in 4 games. But, they're going to need to rely on Peter Mrazek to really be a good goalie for them. And that's where things get a little bit more concerning. They're top 10 in the league for goals for, bottom 10 in terms of goals against. So they got to work on that defensive side of the game. That is going to be an issue here for the Blackhawks, though. You look at some of those young defensemen, I have to shout out, and I probably will a million times this season, Wyatt Kaiser and Kevin Korchinski on that blue line. Huge difference makers for the Blackhawks. I've definitely been watching a lot of the Chicago Blackhawks this season, and a lot of that is because of Kevin Korchinski and Wyatt Kaiser. Not only Connor Bedard, but some of the other talent there as well. So quick shout out to those guys. Number 27 is the St. Louis Blues. So the St. Louis Blues, we all knew they were going to be kind of a middle-of-the-pack team, and they've played like that so far. They're 1-0-1 to start the season. So their season hasn't gotten off to a terrible start, but it also hasn't gotten off to a great start either. Their first 2 games of the season, they dropped the first game in Dallas against the Stars in a shootout, and then they won in a shootout against the Seattle Kraken. It's been a weird start here for the St. Louis Blues. They've won a game 2-1, and they've lost a game 2-1. Now, if that keeps up the rest of the season, I think that's a good thing for the Blues. Craig Berube likes playing those tight 1-2-goal games, keep the score under 3 for both sides, and we have a pretty good chance at winning. So in that regard, I think the Blues have done a really nice job. They're 3rd in the league for goals against, with only 3 goals given up so far in their first 2 games. So that's very promising. But they got to score some more goals because their goals against, their goals for is 26th in the league, which is 6th worst in the entire National Hockey League. Only scoring 3 goals so far this season. Another concern here early on in the season. Last Tuesday, we had an undisclosed injury for Josh Jacobs. He's on injured reserve. And the more recently concerning one being this past weekend on Saturday, an upper body injury to Pavel Buchnevich. Buchnevich is expected to miss the first 1 to 2 weeks of the season, according to Jeremy Rutherford of The Athletic. So that is a really tough blow for the St. Louis Blues. They have not had a power play yet this season, which is kind of interesting through their first 2 games. So maybe they'll get their first power play this week. And their penalty kill is right around league average at 80%. So the St. Louis Blues are kind of chugging along. Defensive game, they need Binner to be good for them. Jordan Binnington and Joel Hofer need to get the job done in between the pipes. They got some good defensemen back there. Torrey Krug, Justin Falk, I forgot his name. Is it Marco Scandella? No, it's not Scandella. I always forget that guy's name. But that's not the point. This is a team that is capable of playing good shutdown defense. They need the goaltending to just be there. And they have done that so far. Number 26 is the Florida Panthers. So the Florida Panthers are not really where I thought they would be. maybe they are in the sense of, like, I expected a slow start, but this has been a real rough start here for the Florida Panthers. 1-2 to start their season. Their most recent game, though, they did get a win, so maybe there's a little bit of upward trajectory here for the Florida Panthers. They lost their first 2 games of this season against the Minnesota Wild and the Dallas Stars. They lost 6-4 in Winnipeg and 2-0 in the Minnesota Wild's debut. What really concerned me about that Minnesota Wild game, and we did a live stream last week. Make sure to stay tuned for those live streams during the week. We talked about how slow the Florida Panthers looked. That is something I would really be watching for if I am a Florida Panthers fan. They got to be a little bit quicker with the puck. They got to move the puck a little quicker. Those transitions, teams are going to eat you up if you are too slow getting back. They need to be a little bit better with that. And I think that this coaching staff under Paul Maurice, he's going to fix those issues. But like I said, they had a pretty quality win in New Jersey nonetheless. A 4-3 victory in Newark the other night. And that's going to give me a little bit of confidence that maybe the Florida Panthers are okay. And maybe we're just a little bit overreacting to their first 2 games. But as of right now, that's where things are at for the Panthers. Number 25, we're heading up to Montreal. So the Montreal Canadiens have actually impressed me a little bit. They are 1-0-1 to start their season. Their most recent victory, a 3-2 victory over the Chicago Blackhawks, which you would say, yeah, they should beat the Blackhawks. Fair. But the Blackhawks have actually looked pretty good, like we talked about earlier. Now, it's been a weird start. So they won. Oh, now this is back to the Blackhawks. Whoops. So the Montreal Canadiens right now, their most recent win, like I said, against the Chicago Blackhawks, and that was an impressive win for them. They needed that game, and they were able to get it done. In a close game, 3-2, that's a tough matchup. They did lose to the Maple Leafs 5-6, that shootout loss, and what made that game so tough is they had a 5-4 lead over the Leafs in the third period, and of course, we know what Austin Matthews does. He ties the game in the final minute, and then next thing you know, this thing goes to a shootout, and the more skilled, better goaltending team did win the shootout, and that was not the Montreal Canadiens. So that was a tough way to end opening night for the Montreal Canadiens, but nonetheless, they still played a pretty good game, all things considered. Number 24 is the Washington Capitals. Haven't watched the Caps much yet this season. I'm going to really try and focus on them this week. But 1-1 to start. They had a 3-2 victory over Calgary. And Calgary actually looks like they could be pretty good this year. So that was actually a pretty good win for them. It was the first non-sellout for the Washington Capitals since 2015, I think. Or 2016. Something crazy like that. So that's obviously not great for them. But hey, it is what it is. They lost 4-0 to Pittsburgh the other night, and I think that gives you a little concern. And I think rightfully so. The Caps fans said, this could be an ugly season. They start a 2-game road trip this week. They're going to play a couple of the Northeastern Canadian teams. They play Ottawa and Montreal, and then they head home to take on Toronto before going to Newark, New Jersey. So they've got a couple of tough games here early on in the season, and I think the Caps are going to be tested. They need to see more from Kuznetsov. He's got to be good for them. They need him to score goals, and of course Ovechkin as well. Anthony Mantha was scratched the other night, and that was pretty notable for this team. So that's something I'm definitely going to be watching. So keep an eye out there on Anthony Mantha. Number 23, we have the Arizona Coyotes. Now, currently they sit at the bottom of their division, and Andre Tournier, as the head coach, seems to be doing a pretty good job with this team, all things considered. You know, it hasn't been the start that Coyotes fans maybe were hoping for and dreaming about, but the reality is this is probably where we expect them to be. And what's interesting about their start, they're starting off with a East Coast road trip where they play the Devils, the Rangers, and the Islanders. So obviously they were able to get a win against the Devils. That was a nice shootout win. Probably stole a point there in that game. The Devils probably deserved to. And that's not taking credit from the Coyotes. They stole the game, but sometimes you need to just do that, right? They definitely didn't play their best, but again, a quality win. Same thing for the Rangers. The Rangers home opener. That's a big game. Sunday night in Manhattan or Monday night in Manhattan. That's a big win there for the Arizona Coyotes. Now they take on the Islanders for Hispanic Heritage Night at UBS. So that's kind of fitting, and I thought that was kind of cool. But the Islanders, that's a pretty quality opponent as well with how things went in their first game. So the Arizona Coyotes are going to get tested. They play St. Louis before having their home opener on the 21st, which I believe is Saturday. So that's going to be a good one for the Coyotes, and they just need to find a way to get a victory. If they can get 1 or 2 wins here, if they could find a way to steal one of these games against the Islanders or the Blues, I think I'd be pretty content with that going to their home opener. You got to have one win, though. And I know it's tough starting on the road sometimes, but you got to find a way to get one. And I think that's kind of where the expectations are for the Coyotes. Realistically, right? Obviously, you'd want them to win both of the next 2 games, but even if they could split down this stretch here, I think that would be good. Number 22 is the Calgary Flames. So the Calgary Flames are, they're kind of in a weird spot. 1-1-1. Their most recent loss against the Washington Capitals, we talked about them. They're also on an East Coast road trip. They played Pittsburgh and Washington, both of those coming out with an L. They play Buffalo, Columbus, Detroit. So they play a couple more games here on this East Coast swing. They got to find a way to steal some wins here. Honestly, you got to win 2 of those next 3 games. Buffalo, Columbus, and Detroit. None of those teams are projected to be playoff teams. And if Calgary wants to see themselves as a playoff team, at least early on this season, that would be a great way to do that, picking up 2 of their next 3 games. But, it's going to be an interesting start. And shout out real quick to Matthew Coronado, getting his first National Hockey League goal. Congratulations there to Matthew Coronado, the Huntington, Long Island native. That is awesome. Number 21. All right, so now no more funny business because the Edmonton Oilers had about as bad of a start as you could have asked for. They played their season opener on the road in Vancouver. That place was pumping. That place was loud. And I will give credit where it's due. The Canucks and their fans, I was ready to run through a brick wall during that captaincy introduction for Quinn Hughes and the walkout song and the puck drop song. Man, that was pretty insane. And there's a reason the Canucks played as well as they did. They get an 8-1 victory over the Edmonton Oilers. The Oilers just got shell-shocked. But they did lose their second game against Vancouver in the home opener, losing 4-3. They've given up 12 goals in 2 games, which is 6 goals per game. That's got to come down for the Edmonton Oilers. We knew goaltending wasn't going to be good for them. They were going to focus on that defensive structure. Doesn't look like a thing has changed so far. They need to get better there. And I know that first game, hopefully that's the outlier. You'd rather that stinker be on the road than at home, but you still lost your home opener the following night. That was your chance to respond. And they just weren't able to do that. They had 3 days of preparation for that second game, and it really didn't help them all that much. Now they play a couple games on the East Coast. They play Nashville and Philadelphia. So the Oilers, man, this is the NHL season. Here we go. And they got to find a way to split those 2 games, if not win both, in all honesty. And at number 20 is the Nashville Predators. Speaking of the Preds, the Predators are 1-2 to start the season. Definitely not the season they were necessarily hoping for to start out. But again, I'm not surprised by their record. What is interesting, though, about the Nashville Predators start, they did play a close game against Boston, a 3-2 loss against the Bruins. So obviously that's not ideal, but it's not like they got shelved like the Oilers did. They lost 5-3 against the Tampa Bay Lightning, and they got a shutout in their home opener against the Seattle Kraken, which definitely gives me some hope. That's a good game for UC Saros. They're going to need a lot of those this season if they really want to compete in the Central Division this year. Number 19 is the Columbus Blue Jackets. The Blue Jackets, it's been a rough start for them. They're 1-2 to start the season, which is not ever the best. But they're not playing terrible. Elvis Merzlikins has played okay, which is something you want to see. They beat the Philadelphia Flyers. They beat a team they were supposed to beat. They beat the New York Rangers. They lost to the Philadelphia Flyers. They lost to a team that they should have beat, and then they followed that up in Game 2 with a game against the Rangers they probably should have lost, but they did win. So right now, the way I look at the Blue Jackets, we're still figuring out what this team is, what is their identity. A 4-0 loss to the Red Wings just last night. Obviously, it takes away a little bit of confidence. Now that's 2 losses so far on the season. You know, they play a lot of home games here, which is good. They play Calgary, Anaheim, and the Islanders before Halloween. So it's one of those things where obviously you'd want to have more games at home early in the season. They had 4 straight home games to start the season. They have not played on the road yet. They got to find a way to beat the Flames. But again, you know, the Flames are going to be hungry coming into Philadelphia or coming into Columbus because they did have that loss against the Philadelphia Flyers. So we'll see how things go. Moving on up now to our top 18. At 18 is the Buffalo Sabres. I know. They're one of the better 0-2 teams so far this year. I watched them in person against the Islanders. Man, that's a good Buffalo Sabres team. You know, they're going to take a lot of flack. A lot of people are going to say, you know, the Sabres haven't won yet. What's going on? But in all honesty, those games they played well in. And as much as, yeah, like they lost the games, no doubt about that. But the games against the Islanders and the Rangers, they made them work for those wins. And the Rangers kind of kicked their ass in the third period of the home opener. But the Islanders game, they were down 2-0 in the first period, clawed back to tie the game in the third, and a questionable kind of throw it in the air call was deciding whether the Islanders basically won that game or not in regulation. So the Buffalo Sabres have not played bad. They're just getting outgunned, and hopefully that's something that they'll be able to fix. I think that's something that for the coaching staff you want to see improvement on going into next game. I expect a response here from Don Granato's group in Buffalo. They need to win their next game because now this losing, you know, they play the next 4 games at home. So they have a real opportunity from now until October 24th is their next road game. They have an opportunity to pick up a couple wins at home and really try to regain some ground where they've lost it. Number 17 is the Ottawa Senators. So the Senators playing quite well. Now, despite their one loss against the Carolina Hurricanes, that was a game they should have been out. Like, out for the count. They were down 3-1. Thomas Hamonic, you know, throws the puck over, delay a game, right? The Hurricanes should stomp on him at that point, right? Go for the final kill, make it 4-1 on the power play, and end this game. Except Ottawa said no. Parker Kelly scored a shorthanded goal. His first and I think 30 games going back to last season. So that was really big for Parker Kelly. Tim Stützle comes down, ties the game, and then the wheels fell off. And the Hurricanes end up losing that game. The Senators end up losing that game. But even in a loss, they fought back in that game. And I think that's really promising and exciting for DJ Smith's Ottawa Senators is if they're going to play more games like that, that is going to be impressive. And even in a loss, in a losing effort, a lot of pride, a lot of respect by the Ottawa Senators for me in that game. Number 16 is Winnipeg. Haven't watched a ton of Winnipeg this year, so this is another team, kind of like Washington. I got to see them a little bit to really get a feel for what's going on there. They are scoring some goals, though. They're 12th in the league for goals for. That's pretty promising, right? Considering they lost Pierre-Luc Dubois. 6-4 victory over the Panthers. They play a couple games here at home against some Pacific Division opponents. They play LA and Vegas at home before going to Edmonton. So a little stretch here for Winnipeg this week. Maybe pick up another win or two. But yeah, I think for the most part, the big storyline, everybody's just in the honeymoon phase. That they re-signed Mark Scheifele and Connor Hellebuck. All those trade rumors put to the side at least for now. And I think that's really big for the Winnipeg Jets. So with that said, let's move on up to number 15, where we now reach the playoff teams, including Winnipeg. These are technically, because they're top 16, yeah, I know there's the different divisions and conferences, but this is theoretically your playoff teams at this point. And number 15 is the Detroit Red Wings. So the Detroit Red Wings, listen, kind of another team. Haven't seen too much of the Red Wings, but what I can say is Alex DeBrincat and Daniel Sprong, they can score goals. And I have noticed that about them. Daniel Sprong is a killer right now. He's already got a couple goals through the preseason. He's got his first NHL goal, and Alex DeBrincat leading the team in points. He's got 3 points and 3 goals and 2 assists. JT Compher playing well. Shane Gostisbehere playing well. This is great to see for the Red Wings, and this is a team right now that if they continue to play the way they are, 4-0 victory against Columbus, this Red Wings team could be a playoff team in the spring. They're playing quite well. Again, honeymoon phase here as well with some of these guys like Sprong and Kopp and DeBrincat, but so far so good for some of these Michigan natives. Really good start so far for the Red Wings. Number 14, the Minnesota Wild. So the Minnesota Wild are similar to the team we saw last year. Very physical team, maybe not the most skilled in terms of offensive prowess, but if they could keep a game tight, Philip Gustafsson plays well in between the pipes, they have a chance to win games. They had a 2-0 victory over Florida. They had a very concerning loss against Toronto, a 7-4 loss against the Leafs. They just look slow. You could tell a little bit of a sluggish vibe to the Minnesota Wild, and that has to get fixed. And I'm not sure that's something you could fix in the middle of the season. They need to score some more goals. That's a problem for them for sure. And their defense and goaltending has been serviceable. Could use a little improvement, but through the first week, I think Minnesota's okay with where they're at. Number 13, lucky number 13 that is the New York Islanders. So the Islanders are at number 13. Very small sample size. I went to their only game they've played so far this season. The season home opener for the Islanders. That's their first one they've won since the 90s. That's right. Their first home opener at home that they've won in their season opener as well since the 90s. That is embarrassing. But nonetheless, the Islanders get a win against Buffalo. We already talked about Buffalo a little bit, but I do want to preface that Buffalo is a bigger team than a lot of people realize, and I think the Islanders had a quality win against the Sabres. Like, that was a tough Sabres team. They did not play well by any stretch, and that's why there's no way I could have put the Islanders in the top 10. I can't justify it, even though it was a small sample size in one game, but the Islanders are going to be a team to watch if Ilya Sorokin plays the way he did. Matt Barzal and Bo Horvat, they had some opportunities as well. So keep an eye on the Islanders. Not saying they're a playoff team right now. They're technically in the top 16, but I do have my genuine concerns about them. But the Islanders, listen, if they could score a couple goals and keep the puck out of the net, this Islanders team is going to be a threat like we expect them to. Number 12 is the Tampa Bay Lightning. The big concern for Tampa comes down to the goaltending. With Andre Vasilevsky out, we saw that first game against Ottawa. They lose 5-2. They lose 6-4 in Detroit. They had a win against Nashville 5-3, but since then, they have given up 11 goals in 2 games. That's not good enough, and John Cooper's going to be on everybody's behind after that. They need to be better. They play Buffalo, and then they have a bunch of home games up until the first week of November. So they have a real stretch, about a 2-week stretch after this game against Buffalo. They have a 2-week stretch to really try and get their momentum back. They play Vancouver, Toronto, Carolina, San Jose, and Seattle. So a mix of everybody, teams in their division, teams in the West Coast, non-playoff teams, rebuilding teams, playoff teams. They have a little test of everything. So for the Tampa Bay Lightning, it's going to be a big rest of the month here in October to set the tempo. Listen, everybody has Tampa out. They're saying, here we go. This is what we expect. The fall of Tampa. Let's see if they could hold that off a little bit longer this season. Number 11 is Vancouver. We know how things have gone for Vancouver so far. They have 12 goals in their first 2 games. Both of them come against the Oilers. A home and home to open up each other's buildings for this season. Really good start for Vancouver. I love what I've seen from Brock Besser, Quinn Hughes, Elias Pettersson. Everybody is on the board and scoring. I love to see it. The Vancouver Canucks are playing well. And as long as Thatcher Demko stays healthy, like we talk about every year, the Canucks are going to be a threat. And we'll see how long they can hold that up. But man, it's been a good start through the first pair of games. Number 10. So we move up into our top 10. Here we go. So looking at number 10, we're heading down to Hollywood, California. The Los Angeles Kings are going to start off our top 10 at number 10. Now, the Los Angeles Kings, Kind of a tough start for them. 5-2 loss against Colorado. A 6-5 shootout loss against the Hurricanes. You know, they're giving up a lot of goals, and that was the concern, right? We had that concern. They've given up 11 goals through their first 2 games. That has to get better. You know, we knew this was going to be a problem. They were going to go with Phoenix Copley and Cam Talbot, and unfortunately, it kind of is looking like the way we expected to, which is not good. Now, maybe the best thing for them is to go on the road, and they will be heading up the road. They are heading to Winnipeg and Minnesota this week before heading home to take on Boston. So a couple of big games here for the Los Angeles Kings. And like I said, maybe the best thing for the Kings right now is to go away and go toward the middle of the continent, going to take on Winnipeg and Minnesota. That might be the best recipe right now for a struggling Los Angeles Kings team. Moving up to number 9, we have the Dallas Stars. So the Dallas Stars, we know the story in between the pipes. It's Jake Ottinger. No real surprises there to anybody. But the Dallas Stars, you know, they're like the Islanders. They're one of the few teams that have only played 1 game so far. And they looked good. A 2-1 victory, a shootout victory over the St. Louis Blues. You know, that's the type of game that you want to that's the game you want to play. And Pete DeBoer got a good result from his group. Jake Ottinger getting his first shutout of the season. He had to work. Oh, no, excuse me. I thought that was a shutout. 2-1 victory over the Blues. You know, the Blues are a team that they should be beating. You know, that's a Central Division opponent that you should be better than. But Dallas takes care of business. And, you know, they're going to continue with a little bit of a road trip here. 3 of their next 4 games are going to be on the road. They play Vegas and Anaheim on the road. They play Philly at home. And then they have to go out to Pittsburgh for 1 game, which is kind of weird because they play Philadelphia for 1 game at home. I don't know what happened with the scheduling there, but I digress. They play Vegas and Anaheim right now. So Dallas is going to get a couple tests on the West Coast. We'll see if they're able to pick up a couple wins out there in California and Vegas. Number 8 is the Rangers. So the Rangers, another one of these teams I'm kind of on the fence about. They look good against teams they shouldn't beat. Well, no, they look good against teams that they maybe shouldn't beat, but they look bad against teams that they should beat. And the reason I say that, they beat Buffalo 5-1. You know, kind of a rough start for the Rangers. They got pushed around in that first period, but shout out to Alexis Lafreniere getting his first NHL goal, Kreider scoring a little bit, Panarin getting on the board. That's what you want to see from the Rangers. But then that second game against the Blue Jackets, 5-3 loss, not really a great result there. And then they would come back and win 2-1 over the Coyotes. And that's the type of game Peter Laviolette likes. So Laviolette and the Rangers pick up a 2-1 win. They start the season 2-1, which isn't all that concerning. But they need to win this next game against Nashville, because after this game against Nashville, they will be starting a big West Coast road trip from now until November 7th. November 7th. They will be playing games in Seattle, Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver, Winnipeg, and Minnesota. So a lot of hockey on the road for the New York Rangers over the next 3 weeks. They need to win some games on the road, build up that momentum, and kind of avenge themselves. Because the start of this season, you know, Columbus and Arizona, those last 2 games were not impressive. They need to get a little bit better. Number 7 is the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now, I know they lost that game against the Blackhawks, but I see that as an actually like a quality loss for Pittsburgh, because, yeah, they should have won that game, but the Blackhawks have actually played pretty well. They've been a tough out so far this season, especially on opening night. They've won their most recent games, their 2 most recent games against the Capitals and the Flames. They've picked up 9 goals in those 2 games. Very promising. They had a shutout in Washington, of all places. Really nice there for the Penguins and their fans. A big, big shutout in Washington. And then a 5-2 win over the Flames. So, you know, the Penguins are finding a way to get it done right now. They play their next 2 games on the road in Detroit and St. Louis. So this is going to be kind of an interesting stretch here. They start off November on the road, that California trip. So Pittsburgh, the more wins they could get before that California trip, the better. Number 6, so Boston is back in our top 10, and Boston deserved it. They had to earn their way back into the top 10. The preseason perception was Boston might not be as good and this and that. Well, they're a perfect 2-0. They're undefeated, and they have not lost a game yet. Now, the Boston Bruins, a 3-2 victory over Nashville, and a win over Connor Bedard and the Blackhawks on opening night. So a pretty good start so far for the Boston Bruins. 3-1, 3-2 victories. Now they head to the Gold Coast. They play games in San Jose, LA, Anaheim, and Chicago before coming back on the 26th for a little homestand. So a couple of games here on the road for Boston, an early season road trip for the black and gold. I think that might be one of the better things for them to gel, pick up a little bit of chemistry, a lot of change into that locker room this past season. So you're playing, they were able to get through those first 2 games at home with a completely new group. They were able to feast on teams like Nashville and Chicago that they really should be beating. Now let's see how they do on this road trip. And coming back home, they're going to be pretty rolling. If they can win more games on this road trip than they lose, if they can win 2 of these 4 games in California, they're going to look pretty good heading back home on the 26th. Number 5, moving up to our top 5, is the Carolina Hurricanes. So literally no change here at the top. The Carolina Hurricanes stay at number 5. Like I said earlier with the Senators, they played a tough game against the Senators. They probably should have scored a power play goal. They give up too late to tie the game at 3, and they ultimately win the game. That's the type of game that Carolina is going to need to win. They're going to need to win games where they punch a team in the mouth and the team punches back. What do the Canes do when the team punches back? And a perfect example of that was that game against the Senators last week. They need to clean up the defense a little bit. The goaltending needs to clean up a little bit too. There were a couple weak goals last week by Freddie Anderson. As long as those things can improve, the Hurricanes are going to stay in the mix throughout most of the season. Number 4 is the Colorado Avalanche. The Avalanche have looked pretty good so far. There's obviously there's room for improvement for every team, but when you're a perfect 2-0, it's hard to complain too much. Their power play has looked, let me see. I remember them saying that their power play was good, but I can't see it here. Let me see. Hold on. How's the power play? Yeah, so it's at 12%. Okay, so maybe it's gone down, but I remember people saying their power play was really good. Their penalty kill is perfect, perfect 100%. So good to see that. So that's kind of it for the Avalanche. Like I said, they're perfect 2-0. They beat the teams they're supposed to. They beat LA and San Jose. They play one more game on the road in Seattle before having their home opener on the 19th, which is later this week. So that'll be a big game for them against Chicago. They play a lot of road games to start the season, which, like I said, good for bonding, team bonding. And I think Colorado's going to be able to do that with a lot of road games in October. And number 3 is the New Jersey Devils. No surprise here. The Devils have played quite well for the most part. They've had their moments. They should have won that game against the Coyotes, probably banging their head. They didn't get 2 points in that one, but they did beat the Detroit Red Wings 4-3. That looks like a pretty quality opponent right now. They did lose 4-3 to the Panthers, though. So now they play the Islanders in Montreal this week. Got to find a way to pick up some wins. Got to win games that might be difficult. And what's interesting for their schedule is, they don't play again till Friday night. And they played last night. So from Monday night to Friday, they have an entire break. So there's going to be a big stretch of games. And then they play the Islanders, and they get another 3 nights off. They play on the 20th, and then they don't play till the 24th, which is going to be next Tuesday. So they play Friday, and then they don't play again until Tuesday. So within a week, they're really playing one game, which it's hard to build early momentum in a season when you have one game in a week. And that's something that, unfortunately, the Devils going through a little adversity to start the season, but I'm not really worried about them. They're a great hockey team. They score goals. Watch out, though. Timo Meier was benched in that third period against the Florida Panthers, so interesting storyline to watch for going into next week. Number 2 is the Toronto Maple Leafs. We know the story with the Leafs. That was an interesting start to their season with the whole goal song thing and a lot of controversy over that because it's Toronto. Of course, there's controversy over a goal song, but I expect nothing less from them. They're first in the NHL goals for 14 goals this season, so good job there by the Leafs. Austin Matthews already has a pair of hat tricks and a 4-goal game mixed in there. Really good start there, but their goals against, They've already given up 13 goals this season. That puts them third worst in the entire National Hockey League. Got to clean up their defense. Way too many passes getting through the crease. It's way too much of an open range in the middle of the house in front of the net. Got to clean that up for the Leafs. And then that leaves us at number 1, which is our our 2023 Stanley Cup champion, Vegas Golden Knights. I just didn't see anything that made me move Vegas off the pedestal. They're 3-0. They're perfect start to the season. They're playing well in the games that I've seen them play. You know, they had that first win against Seattle, 4-1 victory, 4-1 victory over the Sharks, 4-1 victory over Anaheim. They're taking care of business by multiple goals. They're scoring, they're keeping the puck out of the net, and they're winning by multiple goal scores. And that's what they need to continue to do. They play Dallas this week. They play a couple games on the road in the Central. They play Winnipeg and Chicago before we get to next week. And they have a couple of home games. A pretty home-heavy schedule. A couple of road games sprinkled in there. But there's a great opportunity for Vegas to just settle in, build some momentum. You know, there's a different-looking team with Riley Smith no longer there. But I think they are going to be okay. For the most part, this team has stayed intact. And I think that as long as the Golden Knights goaltending stays the way it has, they are going to be a threat. Top 5, they're 5th in the NHL for goals for, and third in the National Hockey League for goals against. What else can I say? Vegas is playing the way we expected them to, and they're getting the job done. Guys, if you're interested, check out our Goal Line Hockey merch shop. Use discount code PUCKISBACK for a 10% off discount code at checkout. Like I said, links will be in the description down below. And if you're interested in becoming a member here for Goal Line Hockey, once we get a couple more people as members, we're going to be doing game live streams just for members only, Q&As for members only. And we have a tier now where you will get a monthly video from a hockey request. So if you ask me, you know, can you talk about Bedard? Can you talk about this? Can you talk about that? We will be doing exclusive videos for you guys in that membership program. So if you're interested in that, check out the links in the description down below. Check out our YouTube community tab where we post a lot of stuff throughout the community. Let you know when our next live streams are going to be, when our next power rankings are going to be, and all of that stuff. Guys, that is going to do it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys again next time. Peace out, guys.